So I just wanted to start off with I understand that you were the board and you were trying to run for city election. And I was just wondering how you got the idea. Like, first of all, because I know you don't want to talk about necessarily the stuff that
Differences.
you do within the
Yeah, yeah,
board that
right.
much, but I
Mm,
think it's really important to notice like
mm,
what was your initial idea, what was your
mm.
initial incentive to run for the board within West Windsor?
Okay, in the school board, right, or the council. Either way, both
Both
actually.
ways, yeah, both.
Yeah, I think the very initial incentive or motivation is to give back to the community. It sounds like a little bit wishy-washy, but that's really true though in my case because if you think about me or your parents the same way, we as the first generation immigrants coming to America, sure we worked hard, we got higher education in college education in China, we came to America typically for graduate school. We sort of made it through our effort and the diligence. At the same time, we have to be grateful for the opportunity given to us as immigrants in this wonderful country, because you cannot say the same for the majority, if not all, the rest of the countries in the world, right? Like imagine if you go to Japan, for example, you may work very hard, but you're not necessarily easily get included or accepted in that society. You'll be viewed as a outsider all the way. But I think in America, I think because of the history of the immigrants and tradition and culture, that's part of the reasons. So I think as an immigrant, I always feel that we need to give back to the community, to the country. I mean, large picture is country, locally. Start from the community, right? And then to a narrow extent, I think this might be a little bit more based on our own community, meaning the Chinese American community. What I often feel that could be subjective judgment is that the Asian American community or Chinese American community, relatively speaking, as immigrants, we have not contributed in terms of the community service
That's
as
true.
much as probably the average Americans. So I somewhat feel obligated. If I have the desire to serve, then I feel obligated to step up a little bit further.
Yeah.
Without that consideration, I will still come out and serve, but probably the motivation to serve at a higher level is somewhat reduced. But with that consideration, I kind of bump it up to the next level, so to
Yeah,
speak.
I gotcha.
Right?
So I have two questions in terms of what you just said.
Okay.
So the first question is a lot of these like politicians on the local, regional, and even national level
Mm,
say the same exact thing that you said in terms of the first phrase you use, which is to
mm,
give back to the community.
right.
But in terms of especially what you just said, in terms of giving back to the Asian community,
Mm,
why did you decide to specifically run for city council? Because I understand
mm,
you are one of the heads in terms of the Chinese American community at high school at the uh, West Windsor like community, as well
mm,
as part of the board. So
right.
why does your run to city council specifically give back more to the community than you have done already?
Um, that's not necessarily more or less. It's a different responsibility. I guess to some extent, I want to expand my public service experiences. The school board deal with now that gets back to the deviation, no, not deviation, the
Yeah, yeah,
division of power, right? So what organization does what? The school board, as you probably figured already, it's responsible for the school district. The school boards have three functions: uh, budget, right? The annual budget, and the curriculum design. We approve it, and then thirdly is the policies and administration piece.
hmm,
Now, the council, on the other hand, city council, on the other hand, is the board that approves the administration headed by the mayor in terms of the city or township's future growth, right? But like how much percentage of the land we want to preserve as open space, how much development the township should do in the near future, and then in terms of maintaining the quality of life, road conditions, traffic conditions, and all that, and services, of course,
yeah,
very down to the daily routines of the citizens. like including garbage collection, for example, and recycles and all that. So that's a very much different responsibilities. Is completely independent of the school, but is serving the community in a different fashion. As I mentioned, I just want to learn more and expand my experiences as a public servant. Yeah.
Yeah. So just off of that note, in terms of your election in 2015 and even your election,
14 actually, the end of 2014, I
yeah,
got.
my bad,
Yeah, yeah,
2014,
yeah.
and your election for city council, do you
Mm.
think the fact that you are an Asian American running for a public office which has largely not been dominated with the presence of Asian Americans, do you think that helps you in terms of your campaign or hurts you in terms of,
That's an interesting question. I think if you ask me in 2013, I would say uh, probably as a relatively minority in the community, it's probably more of an quote unquote a negative in terms of the support because um, our my name recognition by far and large is not as much as if my name is Jonathan or something, right? So because in the 2013 election, there were four candidates. I was one of the four. There was another Indian American gentleman, and then he and I got the last two position. At the time, none of us did a serious campaign. So I think people just went in, probably just vote for familiarity of the names. So the larger percentage of the voters are non-Asian, Caucasian population. So in that sense, if you start from purely name familiarity point of view, that's probably a negative. However, once in 2014, first of all, I mobilized the Chinese American community, number one, and number two, also really reached out to the larger community to show through the Chinese American network and reach out to them to show that I'm actually a highly qualified candidate. I will do good to the school district, to the community, and got a lot more exposure than 2013 election. And
yeah,
that's
and
when
even if,
people
like,
like,
because
yeah,
my parents
right,
in Montgomery, not even
yeah,
my school, in your school district,
right.
was able to support you. It just shows how much,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, definitely. I got a really grassroots support, not just in town, but also neighboring town. And some people took as criticism on me to say, hey, you got maybe special interest group from outsider to support you. My response was to that was not there's really no special interest group per se. It's just like because of the grassroots support from the larger Chinese American
yeah.
community because there are far and few people standing up and running for offices. So I think that was almost like started a small wave, so to speak, right? Because now in the recent years there has been more and more Chinese American candidates running for school boards and around the state. But I wouldn't claim myself being the pioneer because there are Chinese American people running for school board before me. There were a few, but the one that I started in 2014 alongside with two other definitely started a media wave, so to speak, and that mobilized a lot of the Chinese American community and get them more interested in the public affair and the community services.
Hmm.
So again, it's not necessarily me leading the way, but it's I'm one of the sort of initiator in that little wave that kind of interacted with the larger Chinese American
Yeah.
community. So it's a collective effort, right?
Uh-huh.
So because of that, and the Chinese American community is completely on board, supporting me behind me, and then through their network, I reached out to the larger community beyond the Chinese American community. For example, I had um, sort of home gathering in the Indian American communities, a couple of those, and Caucasian American families and friends and Scouts friends and our council connections and all that, and then PTAs. PTA is officially not sponsoring or endorsing anybody, but through the network, I can get their individual support, of
Yeah.
course. So in the 2014, I know it's a long-winded answer, so it's not like easily pros and cons. So it's like if you don't really promote yourself, then there's probably the name recognition is probably more of a negative. But once
Mhm.
I sort of turn around, and even in terms of marketing strategy to start leveraging Dr. YZ, I do have
Yeah,
a PhD in physics.
yeah,
Dr. YZ seems to be a catchy brand, quote unquote brand name, and got
yeah,
a lot of more and more recognition to the point that now I'm knocking on people's doors to run for council. A lot of people whom I don't know them, but they recognize my name.
yeah.
So
So I'm gonna actually go. I'm gonna step back a little bit.
okay.
I think you said a lot of things, and I'm gonna refer to them like later in the interview.
Mhm.
But I want to specifically go back into your roots because
Mm,
I think a large part of the reason why you can expand your campaign so much this year
mm.
is because of the public support that you've been garnering since the 2013 election.
Right.
So my specific question to you is: during that 2014 campaign,
Mm,
how did your three children, because at the time Julian's brothers
mm,
didn't
mm.
graduate high school,
Right.
and your wife's position as a public school teacher influence your campaign?
Ha, ha. Yeah. Good question. 2014, let me think about. Actually, Jason and Jeremy, my twins, are junior, just like yourself this year. So busy year, as you know.
Yeah,
They were
yeah.
extremely busy, and Julian was a freshman in high school. Yeah. So that's 2014.
I
And
remember playing
they,
tennis against them.
yeah. So they helped by participating the so-called door-to-door campaign. So at the point in time, we identified something like 6,000 plus households that collectively need to visit. And bless you,
Thank you.
professionally meet with them and talk to them. If not, leave a camping card, something like this, right? A camping card or
Yeah,
something, right? So so they got a assignment. They knocked down
yeah,
some doors, mostly in our own neighborhood, so that it did because at the time they couldn't drive, and I was so busy
yeah. So my
to
specific question
yeah,
isn't
yeah,
necessarily what they did during your campaign. How
right.
did they influence the start of your campaign, or how did they at all influence you running for the board in
Hmm.
2014?
I see. That's an interesting question. I probably they didn't influence me in terms of an initiation because my initial motivation came
Yeah,
through my years of public service because I was serving public in different capacity. For example, I was the Chinese school board president 2 terms before that, and I was on the Chinese American Association. I was advisory board for Art Council. So in a lower capacity at the grassroots level, or PTSA vice president, and so on and so forth. So to me, it was almost like a natural next step to run for my own election. So not as much that they influenced me to initiate it, but they were supportive.
yeah.
They were supportive because they knew if I start to run this, my time with them would be relatively less. So, but they were supportive to me and my wife too. Of course, the whole family supported me because without
So
the support, the time commitment is
a
is
lot.
large. I mean, obviously, if I didn't run the campaign seriously, like in 2013, where I didn't spend much time, I did not win. But in 2014, I did put in lots of time and effort
Yeah.
to run the campaign. So you had an allergy or some sort?
Oh no, it's just I was like sick yesterday.
Sorry to hear that. Yeah. So hope that answered that part of question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
specifically, now that two out of your three kids have graduated from high school,
Right.
you still really see your family as a cornerstone of the message going into your campaign for city council?
That's a good point. Actually, interestingly, uh, even though they're not here, and Julian has been too busy to help me, although he has been helping me on my website and everything, a little bit on the technical side, right? So he has been doing that, but all of them seem to follow my campaign on Facebook a little bit more.
Mhm.
Like we have a West Windsor, we call it the West Windsor Peeps group, with like 5,000 residents.
Mhm.
It's a huge group. So obviously, there's lots of active discussions back and forth, and some conversation went viral or not necessarily always positive.
Yes.
So they have been following me on that Facebook chat, and they
So,
give me some feedback and even some advices.
mhm.
So now that especially they've been giving me mm, uh, feedbacks from time to time, which I
So
felt
specifically, I'm
frustrated.
just going to
Not,
cut you off
mm,
because
yeah.
um, I
Mm,
think the question that the general like public is wanting
mm,
to ask or wanting to know about
mm, mm,
is now that your
It's
two
11
kids have
o'clock.
graduated, what is the difference in terms of your campaign
mm,
based off of like whether or not whether or not Julian's brothers are still there? Does the
mm,
campaign or does the core of your message
mm,
change because now you can't say like to the general public, I have three kids who are
mm,
within the community. I want to give back to the community.
mm,
Now it's kind of extending beyond that. It's my kids have graduated. I
mm.
still want to do X, Y, and Z. Like, just how has your campaign shifted as you're like,
I see. Yeah, I guess you can say that the two kids in college, that relatively I have more time to give back to the community, maybe. But I think really from the interaction point of view, they were helping me more as a laborer or as a
just like a
door-to-door
support?
campaigner, right? Now they became more, I wouldn't say advisor per se, but they definitely give me some good constructive feedback in
Yeah.
terms of my campaign and my messages on the Facebook and so on and so forth. So
Okay.
that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot
Yeah.
of sense.
Right.
So now going on to something that you said before,
Mm,
specifically your background is STEM. I
mm,
had two questions that I was interested in because
mm.
I am also looking at a STEM education, shifting into public policy for my like future. But it
Okay.
really like what was the transition like from a STEM oriented education into a role as an active political participant in the community? Because those are two very different things.
Yeah. I guess. Yeah. My career, I'm still in IT right now, right? So you can still say STEM. So I got the, the training in physics. I got a PhD in physics. I think the something that in terms of problem solving and in terms of constructive thinking, that part of it can be leveraged with the STEM training, the critical thinking skills, right? And sometimes just thinking out of the box and to be somewhat creative. So I think that part helps me in terms of public service, again, to be more open-minded and to be more objective, right? So because when you do science and research and even technologies, you're more objective. The policies and politics can be more subjective. So
Mhm.
I think the training gives me a bit of a more objectiveness in terms of my position and my point of view,
That makes a lot of
other
sense.
than more subjective. So I think that helps me a little bit. So that's how I think, to some extent, people always say, "Hey, you seem to be always calm and level-headed," right? And I attribute that as part of the STEM discipline. So to that extent, it actually helps.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
So
specifically because if you get elected into city council, you will be doing a lot of things in terms of policy creation.
right.
So I was just wondering, what do you think the importance of a STEM education is in a growing age of interconnected technology? Because in a world where everyone is rapidly developing in terms of technology,
Right.
do you think it becomes more valuable or less valuable to have a STEM education?
I think the STEM education, personally, I want to see as being more cherished in not just our community, but also across the whole country. It's just because I think if you look at the job opportunities out there, the economy, to have a sustained economic development, especially in the technology, information technology area, biotech, and all that, it all does require the STEM education to match But I think at the same time, two other things we have to keep in mind, and one is the STEM education itself is also transitioning into more of a problem solving other than memorization. So the focus on the content, traditionally more on the content, and now is more about the methodology and approaches and critical thinking, which I personally support because I think there was an explosion in the knowledge volume that an individual person can not easily learn all the content.
Mhm.
But if the person can learn the methodology and he or she can always grasp, learn the content quickly and then get to the advanced level to really solve the problem. So that's one area. The other area, I think, STEM should not be isolated on its own. I think the overall education, whether it's music and sports, right, all the extracurricular are still important because with those support, there are two aspects of it. One is as a person, it should be more complete life, right?
Yeah,
And the other, in terms of the overall package, with all the literatures and all the other social studies and all that, will make the future workers or the future graduate more disciplined, not necessarily only in STEM area, but also in terms of communication, for example. Right? So,
yeah,
so that's the piece I mentioned in the very beginning. I think the communication piece is becoming, in my opinion, the most critical piece today and even more in the future.
yeah,
Because people have the maybe the perception now that people can communicate so easily, but
mhm.
at the same time, we all see that in the social chat room and everything, discussion can go haywire very easily,
That's true.
and people get upset and get out of their normal
Yeah,
self easily. Like people talk about road rage, driving on the road. So there is an internet reach, chat room reach that we probably see
yeah,
all the time. So that's why I want to emphasize so much about the way of communication, not necessarily the content
yeah.
itself. So
So
that's
I
why,
think
yeah,
those
we'll
are a
keep
lot
that
of
as another topic. But
yeah,
back to the STEM subject, I'm just saying that the STEM itself, self discipline and knowledge base is all important, and some the fundamentals too, right? And I'm not saying don't even memorize anything. You need to memorize certain
mhm.
critical contents, but also the overall education helps a person become a better communicator, a collaborator, and team worker. So
So the
yeah,
specific question I have is in terms of the school district, you have been on the board
mm.
for around 2 years now.
Almost three.
Yeah,
Yeah,
almost three
yeah,
years now.
yeah, yeah.
So my question is twofold.
Mm.
The first is what is a problem that you see in terms of your school district for STEM education? And my second is as city council, how do
Right.
you wish to solve that problem in terms of public policy or the advocacy of public policy? Because I realize that there are a lot of restrictions in
Mm.
terms of the things that you can do within city council.
Right. The first question, I personally believe we're on the right track already. I think the programs of study reviews should happen on a regular basis, just to make sure that we're up to date in
Can
terms
you
of
explain what that is? Because I'm part of Montgomery and I do not
right.
know what that means.
Yeah.
So I can
The,
write it.
the yeah the program of study basically is a document that talks about the certain subject content. Like for example, if you say algebra 2, right? So
Yeah.
uh, kind of what you're supposed to do in that subject. So and then there's description of prerequisite for certain things, like you have to, for example, in
Is it
order for you to take a
syllabus?
chemistry, you have to take algebra 1 as
Is
a
it the
prerequisite.
syllabus?
Huh?
So in college classes, what they have is a syllabus where they
Yeah.
have a general schedule of what they're
Right,
going to do
right.
every
You,
year.
you can say that. Yeah,
Okay.
the program of study is kind of like a course sequence, and
Okay.
the description of the each courses and the course sequence and dependency prerequisite and so on and so forth. Now that program study is more of Yeah, like a syllabus you mentioned, which is different from the curriculum. Curriculum describes the content more so, in more in depth.
So I think
Of the,
actually the syllabus describes the curriculum. Like that's what happens in our school at least.
okay.
So we have something called Naviance. I mean, we have
In
something
Aviance,
called,
okay.
we use Rubicon, but Rubicon tells us each year, week by
Mm.
week, what we're going to be doing that week.
Okay.
That's just
Yeah.
something that we have in terms of our syllabus. And
Mm.
I'm just genuinely
Okay.
asking.
Yeah, that's more of a curriculum,
Yeah.
and then program of study is more about course sequence and dependencies and such. Yeah. Yeah.
So the second part of my question is, how do you wish to,
Right.
um, well, I
Yeah.
guess you didn't really cite a problem, but how do you wish to advance STEM education within your run for
Yeah.
policy?
Yeah. I think the for STEM to be further improved in our district, first and foremost, I think we need to improve the overall achievement of mass education, starting from elementary level. And obviously, the reading is critical as well, because reading when you have become a efficient readers, then you can become a self learner much more so when you get into middle school and high school. I'm sure you're doing a lot of self learning also
Yeah.
already in high school. So I think these two things fundamentally, mass education and literature, reading and writing, those two things, I'm uh, definitely hoping, or actually we're improving already, but really can be further improved in the elementary level to get more mass education across broader student body,
Hmm.
and then also the language arts, the uh, reading and writing in particular, had also improved. And now along that line, I personally was advocating something called the dual language immersion. It's it's like you're learning two languages in parallel.
Yeah.
Like there's a dual language immersion typically means 50% of the time
Yeah.
you learn, you use one language for subject content.
Yeah.
For example, you can half a day you use Chinese to learn science and math. Right? The other half day you use English to learn social studies and other
So I
things.
don't necessarily
Yeah,
want to go too much into this,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
how does your like I understand the limitations in terms of passing
Mm,
policy for city
mm,
council.
right, right.
How would that work in terms of a program? Because it is very
Yeah,
hard to enforce that
right.
schools must
Yeah,
teach Spanish in one day and
right, right,
English in
right,
another because it is
right.
so
Yeah,
hard to.
it like logically speaking, there's really no correlation between what the city council does versus the school board does or the
Okay.
school district does. I think, but overall, I think the quality of life, which can be influenced by the council, impacts the quality of life of all the citizens, including the young students.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
for example, if we are providing a better sports facility, the students would have better experiences in their sports activities, like whether soccer or tennis or what have
And
you.
that could always be
Yeah.
correlated to better
Yeah.
test scores, to better education.
I think ultimately it'll contribute to the same part,
Yeah.
right? So because to me, as more I'm serving the school board, the more I realize that education is a holistic thing. It's
Yeah.
not just about one subject or two. It's not just purely about academia neither. So the holistic education that I mentioned earlier, I think it will further enhance the STEM. It's actually it's not really weakening the STEM education, but strengthen the STEM education once you have that overall experiences. To me, yeah,
So I understand that you've been really largely involved in terms of the West Windsor School District over the
right,
past 2 years,
yeah,
but I want to specifically ask, as a parent and also as a person who's just been generally within the community,
mm,
within your run for city council, what is one problem that you see that currently exists within the West Windsor community that
mm,
extends beyond the education system?
mm. That's a good beyond education. You mean but first of all, the council obviously has different responsibility. It's not responsible for education, right?
No, yeah, that's
Yeah, yeah,
exactly what I'm
right,
asking,
right,
like,
right.
outside of
Okay,
education.
yeah. So I think to me, the well, from the resident point of view, I can say that from resident point of view, the probably the most number one issue probably statistically is about the relatively high property tax.
Mm-hmm.
I think Montgomery has also pretty high property tax, and Princeton is
Absolutely.
even higher, right? So typically it goes as the following: when the district is doing really well, like all these three districts I mentioned are doing pretty well, right,
Mhm.
in the New Jersey state, and then you will have more families coming in because of the children's age and coming in for the school, and therefore you have a higher student yield per family or per
Yeah.
household, and therefore the expense goes higher and the property tax goes higher. So typically that's how it happened, right?
Yeah.
And, so uh, at the same time, there are certain things that the township can potentially do to sort of save the tax from the resident by introducing more commercials into the township. So one thing I'm thinking, or our team has been thinking, is how can we help bringing in more businesses
Yeah.
into our township? So then we will have more commercial tax income compared to the residential tax income. So right now the percentage is something like close to 70% coming from the residents
Hmm.
and a little bit over 30% from the commercial. But if we increase the commercial to say 50%, right? So if it's 50-50, then relatively speaking, the resident will pay relatively less
Yeah.
property tax. Make sense?
How does that exactly work in terms of increasing the commercial footprint in terms of the resident?
Yeah, I mean, then we have to introduce, for example, if we have certain lands that are not used yet, so instead of developing to residential, potentially we can somehow, whether incentive or some other means, and make it a more of a company headquarter, for example.
So, are
Uh,
the trade-offs in terms of using land that could have been used for residences,
mm,
it is now being used for like these company headquarters as a result
yeah.
of increasing the commercial footprint? Does that create a trade-off that is beneficial for the community or is harmful for the community overall?
Yeah, I think in terms of the tax income, it will be beneficial to the community. Uh, Obviously, the headquarter will hire people, right? So in terms of job opportunity, that's also good for the township. At the same time, as a part of the equation, these people have to live somewhere,
Yeah,
right? So, and that's a balanced approach, and then that has to be a holistic study and decide how to maintain the balance. I'm not saying we're building 100% commercial and no residential because that's
yeah.
probably unrealistic.
Hmm.
But if we emphasize on more commercial as opposed to residential, I think that's something that we can all accept. And then that will benefit, as I mentioned, to the residents more so than taxing them more.
That makes sense. That makes a lot
Yeah.
of
So it's never completely black and white,
yeah.
but yeah, it's somewhere there is a trade off and somewhere there's a balance. And
But
yeah,
you would argue overall it's net beneficial for the community in terms of
right, right. Like recently, there has been some discussion about Amazon's second headquarter coming
yeah. They're looking
to.
at Georgia, they're looking at
Yeah,
California.
so our West Windsor Township through our heads in, we did not get selected even within the New Jersey state.
Yeah.
So we kind of anticipated it'll be tough for us to get it based on the criteria like metropolitan
No
area.
offense, but
Yeah,
like
yeah,
the places that they were looking at in the end were Atlanta, Georgia,
right,
New York City,
right.
and then San Francisco, California.
Yeah, the
Uh,
larger metropolitan.
like
Yeah,
no, none of the cities within New Jersey could have gotten that.
yeah. Well, our pitch was we're right in the middle between Philadelphia and New York City, and we're next to Princeton University, which is one of
Yeah.
the top
But if I was
university.
Amazon, I would be like, I would rather be in New York City than between New York City.
Yeah, I'm just using that example,
Yeah,
and we're saying hypothetically, if they're looking for a headquarter with 50,000 employees, right?
yeah,
So if we say, hey, let's say hypothetically, if Amazon picked, obviously it's not, but
yeah,
picked West Windsor, we have 600 acres, one piece of land, and then there's another 200, 300 acre old research facilities from the RCAs, and if we combine them, potentially we can host 50,000
yeah,
employees of Amazon. However, they have to live somewhere also,
yeah.
and if we
So
don't have anything to offer in our township, whether it's so they will
yeah,
they will be able to accept that deal or not. So it is not black and white, but at least uh, the way of thinking I think is correct. That is to have a headquarter like Amazon. Probably Amazon is too big, but to have some smaller headquarters coming into West Windsor,
so
which actually West Windsor attracted a couple
yeah.
in recent
So
years.
the problem I have is
Mm,
this is just something that I'm thinking about,
mm,
and this is just a question that I just thought of. So
mm,
in terms of the commercial footprint, right
mm.
now, I would argue that there is a pretty large commercial footprint within West Windsor. There are companies like the Dow Jones. There's companies like,
Actually, Dow Jones is in Plansboro.
oh, my bad.
Yeah,
But
no
there are
problem.
just
But
like,
BlackRock moved
yeah,
in not long ago in West
yeah.
Windsor.
So
That's a good
because
point.
there's already so much
Mm,
in terms of a commercial footprint,
right.
how much does introducing more of a commercial footprint really do in terms of decreasing the residential tax? Because as you said,
Yeah.
it is not black and white,
Yeah.
it is not
It's
linear.
not black and white. But if you compare, you mentioned Dow Jones. So if you look at Plansboro versus West Windsor,
Yeah.
we are in the same school district.
Hmm.
The Plansboro residence property tax is definitely lower than West Windsor.
Okay.
I wouldn't say significantly lower, but you can see clearly there is a gap.
The problem
There
I
is a
have
gap
with
between.
the
Yeah.
advocation of public policy that you are advocating
Yeah.
for with your team
Yeah.
is that when you have in terms of like gains versus the amount of, I guess it's like a basic economic term, but as
Right.
you put more time into something, then you decrease the amount of like returns you get from it. So as a result, because there are already so much of a footprint, I guess,
Mm,
so large of a footprint from these
right.
commercial
Right.
actors, does investing more time or investing more resources into increasing that footprint really do anything in terms of the community? Because you
Right.
eventually only get a marginal benefit from it compared to if you put like compared to a few years ago when
Right.
there wasn't as large of a commercial footprint.
Right. It's a good point. I think um, overall, I would still think if we can make an economical, almost like not a Silicon Valley per se, but
Yeah.
to some extent, if we can establish, because we're so close to Princeton, right, and not too far from Rutgers and College of New Jersey, so we have a lot of higher education institutions around us. So hypothetically, if we can make that a economical development area that encourages people from uh, encourage them coming in to our township to establish more of a high tech, whether it's biotech, whether it's IT. I think that's overall a still positive thing for to the economical growth in the area, offering more job opportunities. Obviously, as a side effect, positive or negative, it means more employees in the area,
Yeah.
and they need to find a home nearby, right? So somewhere, somehow, there got to be some kind of accommodation to the residents.
So
Uh,
like no matter, so I get, so
yeah,
you, just to sum up your argument,
yeah,
no matter if you get marginal returns in terms of a
yeah.
residential tax,
Well,
you always create jobs when you have the.
right, right. Exactly, but then another thing is there are a lot of people living in West Windsor.
Mhm.
They commute to New York
New
City
York.
much more so than Montgomery. I
Yeah.
think Montgomery has more people working in the local pharmaceutical companies
Yeah, especially
compared
my immediate
to West
company
Windsor.
is
Yeah,
Bristol Myers Squibb, but I have a
right,
lot of
exactly. Yeah,
parents.
exactly. So in your community, you have more of a local commuter to work in New Jersey, but in our township so far, there has been a large percentage of commuters going to New York City, like the financial institutions and then other verticals, but lots of them are going to New York City. Nothing wrong with it, but hypothetically, if we can provide equally high paid jobs within our area, it will reduce their time travel commute to New York City, improve the quality of life, of
Uh-huh.
course, right?
Yeah.
So so we don't necessarily have to increase the number of employees in the area, but maybe they relocate the job from New York City to
Yeah.
local area, right? So there are definitely multifaceted. This is definitely not just a simple black and white
Yeah.
a
And I
picture.
understand
It's
that we
definitely
only talked about maybe three benefits, and there might
right.
be like
Right.
20 benefits and like one harm in terms of
Right.
policy. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's the thing about policy making. That is, as much as we can think about all the consequences, sometimes unintended consequences may come or come bigger than anticipated.
so you just have to
That
make
can
sure
happen.
in terms of creation of public policy
Yeah,
that the benefits outweigh the possibility of a harm so
yeah,
significantly that even
right,
if a harm or
right,
a really large consequence came out of
right,
it, you
right.
would still be getting a net benefit for the community.
Right, right. So that's the it. At some point, it becomes a judgment call.
Yeah.
The judgment call of the resident too. The resident have to come in because the residents are the ones
Yeah.
electing us. So we are, for the most part, their voice. We should represent their interest, right? So that's the part I mentioned in the very beginning. I'm learning as a
Yeah.
uh, policymaker with the school now, the becoming a policymaker for the township. That is, yes, I may have my point of view, right? That I may be insisting on it's correct and it's good, but at the same time, you know, objectively speaking, I have to learn to pull myself out of the situation
Yeah.
and really forget about my own position and really
So
open my ears and open my mind and listen to what other people have to say and then think it through. So that's the part of the communication and skill that I'm talking about. I think communication starts by listening, and people, in my opinion, a lot of the public forums, the problem is that they don't listen to other people, especially people holding different opinions, with respect and with the open
I
mind.
think that is a very hard thing to tangibly change.
Yes, it's hard to change, but for people running office, which are somewhat elected, I hope the voters can use that as one of the key metrics to say, hey, is this particular candidate more open-minded, a good listener? I think that's a really important quality to
Yeah.
run the office. Because
I think
otherwise, you have
important.
hard hat running the
Yeah.
top office or something to say my way or highway. I think it's going to be net negative. That person may have some great idea one moment in time, but how
Mhm.
can you guarantee that a single person's mind can be
Yeah.
always right? Right
So,
in a
like, I
complex
think
world.
that is a very good idealistic view
Yeah.
on how the public opinion should be. But in reality, and especially after the 2016 election, we've clearly seen that that is not the case. So,
Yeah, yeah.
stemming
That,
off of that
that,
argument,
right,
you've talked to me about the communication perspective, the education perspective, and
right,
the economic perspective of your
right,
city council campaign.
right,
What
right.
are the other perspectives or the other programs that you might be looking at in terms of public policy for your city council run?
Yeah, I think the other thing that I'm not formed opinion on is how can we retain more families after their children left the school? Because that's one of the reasons I mentioned earlier that we have a relatively higher property tax, like school
Mhm.
district like yours, Princeton, and us, right? We're
Yeah,
similar in a sense that people are coming here for higher education, and lots of them move out immediately after they become empty nesters.
yeah,
So how can we potentially attract more people stick around after the kids graduated from high school? I think that's one thing I want to look into that, and our team is looking into that as well. it's not a there's no easy solution. I mean, there's some ideas are being toyed around, like okay, maybe somehow give them a rebate or something in the
I
property
personally think
tax.
that your economic policy is really good in terms
Mm,
of creating those opportunities to allow people to stay
right,
past those the benefits
right.
of the school district.
Right, right, because that is one. There's a couple. I mentioned the commercial tax income being one uh, systemic approach, and the other potential resolution is coming from a higher percentage of senior citizens stick around, right? If they stick around more, I mean, even let's say hypothetically, if we I mean, this is obviously not a policy just yet, but
Yeah.
hypothetically, if you reduce their tax uh, in contribution by hypothetically even just 20%, give them some incentive to stay here, but they're still going to contribute more in terms of the education fund.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because this about 60 some percent of our property tax are going into the school district.
Yeah.
That's just a fact today, right?
I think it's just really hard to implement that policy that
Mm.
you are specifically advocating for just because there are so many things that have to be accounted.
True, true. I mean, I realize that. That's why probably we shouldn't write that piece into the
Yeah, yeah.
article.
I'll make sure I don't include it.
Yeah, yeah, but because if you're a family with children,
Mhm.
you'd love to have more senior citizens contributing to your children's
So,
education.
like, this is really relevant to you because Julian is about to graduate this year. Your two kids have already graduated.
Right, right.
So, what does the future hold for you and your career in politics? After
Yeah,
Julian graduates, do you still plan on pursuing a position past city council, or
right.
do you plan on?
You
I
know,
know you can't say that you're going to be moving, but do
right.
you plan on moving away from the West Windsor community and more into the state of New Jersey?
Yeah, I right now, Julian's mom and I we talked about it. Our current plan is to stay after even after Julian graduate next summer. So we're going to become relatively senior citizens, even though we're not really senior just yet in terms of our age, but becoming empty nesters, we do plan to stay around, not necessarily just to say, hey, we want to contribute back. I mean, some people actually say that. By the way, I mean when I visit the township residents, some people they're some humbling people, and they're people who really think that way. So which is wonderful, right? But that maybe people say, oh, that's again wishy-washy, maybe, but for the large part, I think it's a balance between quality of life and your familiar circle of friends versus the high tax income. So nothing is black and white in this area. I mean, we do have lots of
So
residents stick around for more than 40, 50 years. I met many of them, and they cite the key reason being high quality of life and a good circle of friends, right? And they like the environment, and sometimes maybe momentum. Sometimes it's just they just don't feel comfortable moving to elsewhere anymore, right? So
So,
whatever the reason might be, I think those reasons should be explored a little bit, and make it some sort of incentives potentially, and then have more of them stick around. And that way, we will reduce the student population a little bit
so
and
moving
maintain a high quality
moving
education.
back onto your career in politics.
Right,
From my understanding of what you said in the initial part of the interview,
right,
you plan to give back to the community to the
right.
maximum degree that you can possibly do.
Right.
And I think personally, when I hear that,
Mm,
it gives me the idea that you may be looking at public positions
mm,
past city council, past just within your district, and more into a regional level, a state level, or possibly a national level. So, in
mm.
those circumstances, do you still see yourself playing an active role within the West Windsor community?
Um, that's a good question. First of all, I really don't have the long-term vision for my quote unquote political quote unquote career. To
Yeah,
me, the reason that I'm not just saying that because I'm preventing people from saying, oh, you have a too much of a high political
no,
ambition.
no,
Not
no.
because of that. I think what I see in the difference between American political system and to more centralized government like Chinese government is that the American political system or government system is very much distributed power. So you know that the federal government doesn't control the state, and state
Yeah.
doesn't control the township. So you can have a township mayor openly criticize the governor, and the governor openly criticize the president. Right? No
Mhm.
problem. So because the policies are made independent of obviously there are overriding laws at a different
Yeah.
level that you have to follow. For example, something called affordable housing,
Yeah.
right? That's a policy, that's a
Mhm.
law by the state. So each and every single township has to follow and build a certain percentage of affordable housing to
Yeah.
accommodate the economically, social, economically disadvantaged
Yeah.
families, right? So I'm just using it as one example. But what I'm trying to say is, I think I would be content and satisfied if I'm able to help the local West Windsor Township to maintain a high quality of life or even better. I would be very happy,
Yeah.
even just keep
So
it.
I want to ask a
Yeah.
question that sounds a little bit crass,
Right.
a little bit blunt.
Mm,
But my question is, and especially this is going to be something that I will be writing.
mm,
But how can you ensure your voters that you will not be like some of the other people in terms of moving from the community? So
mm,
as soon as Julian graduates, how can
mm,
you ensure to the community that it's not going to be like, oh, I'm going to do city council for 2 more years and then I'm also going to bail? Like, what
mm,
specific incentive do you see in terms of the West Windsor community that will
mm,
allow you or compel you to stay even beyond
mm,
Julian and
mm.
brothers graduating from college?
Yeah. I think it's just a sense of a community.
Hmm.
I look at our mayor, Sheng Fushe, who's has been living here more than maybe for 30, 40 years, right? And he served the public for 24 years
Yeah.
already, 8 years as a council member, well, including 4 years as council president, and then 16 years as a mayor. So if you look at him, he really called West Windsor home because you have to find a home no
Yeah.
matter what. So the question is, where do you find your ideal home at your heart, right? That's basically the fundamental question. I think people with more public service experiences tend to stick around because they have already built a group of, you can call it
Political base.
supporters or
Yeah.
political base or constituent, whatever you call it, right? Or I call it a circle of friends. I have many circle of friends,
Yeah.
above and beyond the Chinese American community, actually. So I feel, yeah, if you feel comfortable, because after all, people are social animals. So if I feel comfortable living here, I feel not necessarily, not necessarily that nobody would criticize me or anything, but at least I feel like I'm here. I'm respected by my friends,
Your roots
and
here.
I'm appreciated by lots of the residents for my service. I feel satisfied. So I think it's just, it comes back to your heart.
Yeah.
It's a decision not necessarily all by numbers.
Yeah.
It's a not as a tangible decision, not just, oh, I pay high tax and everything, but like how happy you feel if
Yeah.
you live here versus you move to Florida, where you maybe run into a bunch of strangers, and I mean you can get to know them, but you deal with senior citizens all day long. Are you happy with that kind of life?
Yeah, that's true.
Some people say yes, I'm happy. I want to deal with people with the same age, but in my case, I do want to see children. I mean this would not be a plan for my future, but hypothetically, if Jason, Jeremy, and Julian come back to town, I would be
Yeah.
very happy if they live next, block down, and I can walk to their house and see their children and my grandchildren. I
Yeah,
think that would be
definitely.
wonderful, right? So definitely not something I'm demanding, I'm asking for, but something, if happen, it happens, right? That's happened to the mayor today, right? His both of his actually, our mayor, he has two children. One, his son actually lives in Montgomery.
What is his son's name?
Stephen Shea. Stephen Shea. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
none, none
No,
are.
no. He's already a grown up. He has his own children in
Yeah.
the school district, and he runs his own company. Very successful businessman, Princeton graduate. His daughter is a Chinese teacher in our
Yeah.
school district, and so she lives in our town, actually not too far from me. Yeah, so I think that's even Montgomery is not too far, so the mayor can drive to
Mhm.
his son's house easily, or his son can visit him every weekend or something, bring the grandchildren over. So I think that's, if you look at the overall quality of life, I think that's wonderful, right?
Mhm.
So as of now, obviously things may change. As
Mhm.
of now, I view West Windsor as home, uh,
Okay.
and that's why I'm standing up to run for the council, because the council will last 4 years, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and Julian will graduate next year, so
Yeah.
I won't say, "Hey, my son graduated, I quit,
I'm
let me
out of
move
here. Yeah.
to Florida." No, that's not going to happen.
So
So yeah.
I just wanted to ask, like, before I'm gonna segue into, so basically what I'm looking at in terms of my article
Mm,
is I want to develop you, like who you are, because
mm,
I think a lot of the West Windsor community already knows you,
mm,
but the people who don't know you, I want to
mm,
be able to
mm,
cultivate that political
mm,
base so you can
mm,
get that
mm.
support for your voters.
Okay.
So I'm only going to ask one last question
Mm,
specifically based on policy,
mm,
and then I'm going to segue
mm,
into something more in terms of the political footprint you want to leave.
mm,
So my last question in terms of public policy
mm.
is, what is the most difficult aspect you've seen within West Windsor for sustaining the base support that you had during that 2013 election for your upcoming election? And specifically, I understand that you highlighted a lot of policy points that a lot of
Mm,
people can empathize with.
mm,
So how do you really plan to appeal to that base, or how do you appeal to spread that base in
mm,
terms of your run for city council?
I think that's a very good question, because that's kind of goes back to my emphasis on communication, and also being open-minded, because there is a difference between 2014 election versus this year's election. Uh, on the one hand, I may not have the 100% Chinese American community behind me this year, because on certain school district policies or votes that I voted certain positions that may be pleasing to music to certain people's ears, but not
Yeah.
to some other, right? So, so in terms of, in particularly to the Chinese American community, I have heard descendants. Now, I mean, 14 in 2014, I didn't do anything, so there's no track record, right? So everybody just supported me, probably simply because I'm a Chinese American candidate, right? So, but now, based on the 3 years track record, some Chinese American resident, based on my voting and this and that, to say, hey, I'm not so sure he is representing the
Yeah.
Chinese American community's interest. Okay, there are voices like that, but at the same
So
time,
just a
I
quick,
still, yeah,
uh,
because the Chinese American communities are not the same either. There's a spectrum also, right? So, so that's the part that I'm. You can say, I may be losing certain percentage. It's hard to say how much percentage it is, but
yeah.
definitely there are certain percentage of Chinese American either not supporting me anymore, or become more reserved in terms of their support to me, right?
But at the same
So,
time, it is
but at the
really,
same time, I'm actually expanding a broader support across, be above and beyond
that's what I was gonna say.
Chinese
Yeah.
American community. So that's the thing. That's why I'm saying, some people may simplify it by saying, look, Dr. YZ wants to get elected, therefore he is giving up his Chinese American based interest to appeal, to please the non-Asian community, which is false, but people believe what they believe,
Yeah. And I
you know what
think
I mean?
especially with this interview,
Yeah,
it really demonstrates that the reason why you're running and the reason why you are doing this is not for a personal gain, is not for Julian, is not for your family, but rather it is for the community. It is to
yeah.
benefit the community. And
It benefit the community to
so,
some extent, also benefit the Chinese American community, because, as I mentioned earlier, because we statistically, we don't have enough
yeah,
people standing
so
up and do the
just
service.
a
Yeah,
just a quick thing.
right.
I understand that the Chinese American voter is your main voter base,
Mm,
but at the same time, it is really important to recognize that that is still a significant minority within the population of
right.
West Windsor.
Exactly.
So as a result, how do you plan to appeal to the majority? Because if you just focus on your Asian base,
Right.
you most likely will not be able to win re-elect or win election because you
Right. Right.
do not appeal to the other
Right.
groups.
Right.
So what do you specifically have um, to allow these other like voting blocks to have an incentive to vote for you?
Right. I think that's really the what I mentioned, the open-mindedness and also balanced approach.
Hmm.
Because people may come in with a strong opinion. I came in maybe with a certain opinion myself as a board member. For example, when we were talking about reforming some of the mathematics instruction,
Hmm.
the district recommended getting rid of the accelerated and enriched math program in the elementary school level, the fourth and fifth grade. So that caused lots of controversy. I don't know if you even realize at the point in time, even New York Life, the New York Times reported our district's
Yeah, I did
controversy.
not know that.
You don't know, or you don't.
I did not realize that.
Okay, okay. So there's that at that point in time, I was holding more of a strong opinion about the instruction has been going on for 30 years. It's good. My three boys went through it. They all benefited from it. And I wrote an article and published it to say I support this program.
Okay.
We shouldn't get away with it because the
Then,
future generation needs it, right?
yeah.
But then I after the voting, everything said and done. And by the way, the I voted no, but we only have two board member voted no, 7 yes. So we passed that resolution. So the AE program got removed by the end of 2015. So after 1 year of my school board member term, right? But after that, I did a lot of research and also reflection on myself and really talked to people believing strongly this program should be removed because of A and B and C and D. So just listen to them and put myself opinion aside for a moment and just to think about why they believe such a belief. Is
Yeah.
that because they're trying to attack the Chinese American community who has a large population in that program, which a lot of people believe in that, or there's a bigger and broader, higher level reasons. So I turned into again, I'm holding a belief that the administration and the supporters
Yeah.
high ideal is to really benefit the entire school district
So
by
I
removing the
think,
label early on that can benefit the broader student bodies and also less competition introduced at the elementary school level because you're going to have that in the middle school and high school when you're getting older and you're more mature. You can deal with that much better, but in elementary school now I do agree based on my own, you know, including some soul searching also. Including soul searching, meaning I'm remembering back when I was in elementary school in
mhm,
China, the hostile environment. Obviously, I was the winner. I was always top one, if
yeah,
not top two, three in
yeah,
the class. So, but I remember there's lots of the students at the bottom. They just gave up completely in
hmm,
terms of that, right? I mean, now we all know in the American education system, in elementary school, there's no score or anything. I mean, they
yeah.
don't. You get a passing or like approaching or something, right?
Mhm.
So I think there is a reason for the educational professional to do that. It's to protect individual children's confidence and
And also
build the
protect your
love of learning, not early exposure of this grade and the care the grade is so
it's like
much so,
you're a
right?
third grader, let's learn calculus. Like that just
I,
doesn't happen for a reason.
you got that point. I think sometimes, as much as I understand, as an immigrants, we focus so much on children's education, which is rightfully so. At the same
Yeah,
time,
education
I
is
think
very
we need
important.
to pull ourselves up a little bit more to think about the bigger picture. Like, what do you mean by a successful education of
So,
a student? Like,
okay.
Rocky, if you don't go to Harvard, is that a failure? Absolutely not. You know what I mean? now,
So,
now I think the children now realize that.
yeah.
My children, they all
So,
realize that. But a lot
um,
of the parents, their minds a little bit stuck at that point. You say, "Oh, I have my kids have to be in the fast track
yeah.
math program, otherwise I would feel really bad. Then there will be a failure or something." No, I'm exaggerated a little bit, but there are definitely a
Yeah,
percentage
I
of
think that is very
parents.
specific to the Asian
Right,
American community that exists
right,
within
right,
Montgomery as well as
right, right,
West Windsor.
right,
But my specific issue with what you said in the beginning of your statement in response to my question
right,
is a very idealized message in terms of what voting looks like. Because
right.
in the 2016 election, in terms of the issues with Hillary and Trump,
Yeah, Right.
you oftentimes saw that some of the reasons why people voted for Trump was not necessarily because they liked him, but
Right.
rather it was because Hillary had a specific stance on abortion or
Right.
had a specific
Right.
stance in terms
Right.
of
Lot,
abortion.
lot, lot of people would the political analysts call it single issue voters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with simple issue voters in
Yeah.
terms of
Simple or single issue voters or simple issue voters. Single. Some people call it single issue
yeah,
voters.
single issue voter, my bad.
Yeah, I think a single issue voter is a challenge to me is a really real challenge in the democratic political system because single issue voters tend to simplify a complex system to look at it from one single angle and amplify that
The
100
thing
times big.
is, as
Yeah,
a voter, like
yeah,
even for me, if I
yeah,
am looking at everything that Hillary does, everything that Bernie does, and everything that Donald Trump does,
mm,
in the end of the day, even if I think that myself, I am
I know.
very objective in terms of
Mm,
the
mm,
political
mm,
atmosphere.
mm, mm.
In the end of the day, like if I care about abortion, that is what I'm going to vote on. That is what is going to
Yeah,
turn my vote.
yeah,
So
yeah.
how do you create that broad-based appeal in
Mm,
terms of your campaign that you can appeal
yeah,
to all these single issue voters while
yeah,
also appealing to your
yeah.
base?
Yeah, that's where I emphasize in this election. Our team or our platform is based on collaborativeness.
Mhm.
We if you look at our tagline, I'm going to email you some materials, and we call ourselves
Yeah,
progressive, uh, collaborative, and principled. And by the way, this was actually the three words were picked by Jeremy and Julie over the summer when Jeremy was around and they were building my website, our website, I should say. I mean, then my campaign team manager were like, "Wow, your kids are pretty good. They should
yeah,
be
yeah. They're
part of the
definitely
campaign team."
impressive.
Yeah, so they picked the word, but we use that. So we say progressive because we're ideologically are more progressive. And I wouldn't call it Democrats versus Republican, but you know what I mean. I mean, there's a
Compared to other
subtlety there.
candidates.
Yeah, I mean, there's a subtlety because it is a nonpartisan election at a township
That is
level. Yeah, but we are progressive and we're collaborative. The principle and collaborative is the part where we want to emphasize that the approach is collaborative, but
hmm
we also hold a certain principle. The
yeah.
principle goes back to the ideological thing. Like,
Mhm.
for example, we want to help people. We want to make sure that disadvantaged people are taken care of, right? And that's nicely in our town. For example, we believe that in our affordable housing building, we should not concentrate them in one part of the city or township, but should
Mhm.
be widely distributed across the entire township so that they
They have
don't
the opportunity
feel.
of social mobility.
Yes, exactly, and they don't feel isolated, and
Yeah.
their children won't be pointed finger at to say, "Oh, see, these bunch of kids are coming from that particular low-income community," right?
Yeah.
And then you potentially can have inner city like issues, maybe, So I think those things are what I call the principle, but
Yeah.
the collaborative part, because of based on the progressive beliefs, but the collaborative part, I think, is the most important because this is what we think that we should be a better listener than a something like I think this is the way it is. It should
Yeah.
be. It got to be this way, right? So we don't want to be fixed minded. We want to be open minded and really, really listen to the because almost always you have at least two sides of this argument, if not more than two, right? So by listening to all of them and really deeply understand what their fundamental concerns or reasonings, I think is more fundamental. I think right now, not just a politician, but every single citizen, when we're in a conversation, people tend to brush off people with different opinion too easily, too
That's true.
quickly.
Just
I
because it's
think
too easy now.
yeah, so I think if and when we can all understand a different point of view deeply and to their hearts, right? Really, really drop your own opinion for a moment and listen truthfully to each other. I think that will be more a lot more probably that we can build a common ground.
Yeah.
Right? We'll find, you know what? There's a more common theme in our beliefs than the differences.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the political system is focusing on the differences so much so nowadays that it tear apart our community,
Yeah.
basically. It goes, it's really go to the two extremes to some extent. I'm a progressive. I consider myself a moderate Democrat. I'm more ideologically more liberal in terms of fiscal responsibility. I want to be a little bit more conservative,
Mhm.
surplus, and I want to control the government spending and that, right? So I'm kind of in the middle of the road, but I think the political atmosphere in our country, especially after last year's election, got a little bit torn into the two extremes, and that's somewhat sad. But
Yeah.
I think for the local government, it doesn't need to happen like that. That's why I believe our team and platform, uh, the three of us all believe the same thing. That is, we want to listen to people. When we visit thousands and thousands of homes, we always ask them, "What are your top three concerns?" If
That's
some people say, "No, nothing. It's all good." Then we say, "You know what? That's wonderful." But we
that's even better. That just means like
yeah,
that.
we don't let's maintain it, right? So that's actually the majority of people do say that, and that's why they stay here, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the majority, but that doesn't mean that the majority doesn't have a point. So when they have a point, they talk about certain, especially some local issues. Some issues are very much local to that particular block,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you have a road closed and you have some traffic coming into that area that is just bypassing traffic and hitting people. Yeah, so something like we need to enforce the police and things like that nature. I think we really want to listen to what people have to say and then understand the deeper level of, again, the concern and issues, and then the chance of us coming up with a solution would be better. So that's why when I talk to people in a public speech or something, I said this following. I said, I'm Dr. YZ, right? They call me Dr. YZ. I
Yeah.
said, when I become Dr. XYZ, meaning I'm becoming past, right? Whether it's
Yeah. Yeah.
retired or died or
Yeah.
something. But I said, I really want people to remember me as number one, a problem solver, and number two, a peacemaker. So these two things kind of go hand in hand, because if you can look deeply into the issues, not just superficially, but look deeply into the issue and find a common ground and find a solution to the problem, you are a true problem solver.
That is
Right?
true.
And I can leverage scientific research and skills from my training, right? So problem solving. And then a peacemaker is more on the political spectrum, to say, look, a lot of times it's about compromise. There's no perfect solution, especially you have a conflict of interest in
Yeah.
between two groups. Where do you draw the line? You can't say, hey, you win, you lose, right? You have to see, hey, best is a win-win, but sometimes it's like you win half, the other win half, or something. So there's got to be some kind of compromise between two or multiple parties when you have a conflict of interest among those different interest groups. So I
Yeah.
think the peacemaking part is underemphasized in the political system. There seems to be a belief of fighting, like, oh, I'm a fighter. I need to fight my interest. I need to fight my own interest. Need to fight my community interest. I need to fight for the Chinese American interest. I mean, at some extent, it is right, especially when you're being suppressed. Like, for example, when there was a Chinese Exclusion Act in
Yeah.
1840 or something. I mean, that's the time you fight. When during the civil rights movement, you fight. But now we have got into a stage where mostly, we're all equal now, right? I mean, there's discrimination, there's that, but I
And
think
also, when you say
understanding.
fight, the word fight is different based on a different period of time, because
Right.
in the civil rights movement, especially in terms of
Mm,
looking for women's rights and looking
yeah.
for rights for African
Right.
Americans, what you specifically saw was the arguments by the initial arguments people made were not we want rights, we want equality. It was
Right.
please like listen to our side, and then eventually it grew into this movement which could push for that like ultimatum goal.
Right.
But it was just important to note that it doesn't go from exclusion act to equality. It goes from exclusion act to open up conversation to
Exactly.
integration to all these things
Exactly.
which
Yeah.
eventually lead to equality.
Yeah. It is still a peaceful evolution for the most part, right? And then we have gone so far to the point where we have relatively a pretty nice equal political system now, right? And I don't think at this point in time the emphasis should be more on peacemaking than fighting.
Yeah.
So that's really the platform or the philosophy that our team strongly believe, that we believe with that kind of attitude and approach, we will do well. I
Yeah.
mean, we can nobody's perfect, and we can't
Yeah.
say, "Hey, we'll make the West Windsor like the best town living in America" or something. That's like almost like in a school, as you want to say, "I want to be the top number one student." I mean, that's a little bit
You
subjective
have
and
to work for it.
far-reaching. Yeah, but but with that attitude, I think just like if you individual person hold an open mind and growth mindset, you will be happy no matter what. Actually,
That's true.
you know. So it's kind of along that line as a community. If
Yeah.
we have the leadership holding that similar mindset to say, "Hey, we're in this community together. We're neighbors. We're brothers and sisters. Let's don't fight all the time.
Yeah.
Let's sit down and talk about our differences. Let's share our ideas. Let's interact more, right? And let's learn from each other's culture, appreciate each other's
Hmm.
background and culture. Let's build a common community that would be loved and enjoyed by all parties,
Yeah.
right? So that's a little bit ideological, but I think it's doable. I mean,
Yeah.
it's and start if you have the township mayor, council member all holding similar principles. I think the entire community will follow suit, right? If you're fighting all the time at a council meeting, like shouting at
It's
each other
12 o'clock.
or something, then yeah,
Yeah.
you promote that culture across
Mhm.
township, right? So if somebody come on the council resident being negative on anything, I think the council shouldn't take offense or the mayor shouldn't take offense to say, if
Because
you
they need
come
to
here,
express their opinion.
yeah, you come here to express your opinion
You
on its
care about it.
own, it shows that you care about it,
Yeah.
right? So we appreciate, want to listen to you. I think when you have that attitude, the complainer will come down
Hmm.
already. So that's why I'm
And
emphasizing
also,
so much
you
so
need to
about the
have the
communication.
complaint to have a solution to a problem.
Right,
That's the
right.
first step.
Exactly. So don't take the attitude as a negative,
Yeah,
right? So
that's
to
right.
take it as constructively. So because it's a give and take, right? And obviously, the best situation is, the complainer, him or herself, is very constructive. That's the best situation. But
Yeah.
sometimes you get individual citizens who just get so upset about a particular situation. That's understandable.
And
And
it seems
you
like you are the reasonable actor in that case because you're very calm
right,
and you
right.
can listen to them,
E- e-
interpret what they're saying, and
Exactly,
then
exactly.
promote a compromise.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that back to the point, I think that's where I emphasize so much about communication to the point that I send, I've been a student of Dr. Rosenberg.
Oh,
He is the founder of a nonviolent communication. You do a Google search,
yeah.
you'll find his YouTube video. Like one of the videos is 6 hours,
Oh
very
my
long.
God.
Just a monologue talking to himself
Yeah.
or talking to the audience. But his philosophy and approach, I really appreciate. I mean, because he talked about how to communicate effectively and passion.
Hmm.
Really show your compassion, and your sincerity, and then you can truly connect when the people to party or multiple parties, bless you, are truly connected to each other. You have a much better chance to build a consensus and you build a mutual understanding. Because the problem again in this country, even I didn't vote for Mr. President, but I would not attack him. I would not pointing him to say here he's a loser. All these things that some of his criticizers are saying. I'm not going to say that because hey, I would rather believe he has the best interest to run this country to the best he can. I mean, if
And
he's
that is very, very progressive. That
yeah,
is
I mean, if
very
he
progressive.
is somewhat incapable, that's a different issue. I mean, if he has a lack of good judgment, that's a different issue, right?
Yeah,
But I would not second guess his motivation
that
to
makes sense.
to make the country he believe a stronger America.
Yeah,
I would not have that kind of negative conspiracy theory on him to say, hey, all he cares about is home.
because that precludes the possibility for positive change.
Exactly. And then you would say, oh, all he cares about is family business. He just want to get a name and promote his children. I would rather not to believe that. Okay. I mean, even if it's somewhat true, I would refuse to do that because that way it'll be more of a negative to negative to negative kind of a
Yeah.
loop, right? Feedback system. I would rather have a positive feedback so that we're going to the positive direction.
Yeah, so I think it is very important to note the emphasis you put on not only communication, but more importantly, the ideas of compromise and the
Yes.
ideas of listening to other people.
Right. Exactly.
So, with that
Exactly.
being said, I have finished. Well, I had a few more questions, but
Mm.
I don't think they are relevant anymore because you explained everything you wanted to say so succinctly.
All
And I
right.
think we, at some point at like 11:51, we started to segue into a conclusion, and I think you did really well in terms of succinctly summing up the main part of your campaign. Um, is there anything else that you would like to add before the interview concludes?
I think probably we covered it all. I mean, we have the website I can share with you, and
Yeah,
we
that'd be
have
great.
our some articles. You know, I have
Yeah,
my friends' endorsement letters. I can share with
yeah.
you some of those things. The mayor wrote something for us as well. So I'll share how
Okay.
these
So I have two
published.
questions.
Yep.
The first is I am not sure if I'm going to be the one writing the article. I only know that I am the one doing the interview.
Interview. Yeah,
But
you
if I
did.
were to write an
You
article,
did a great job.
thank you so much.
Absolutely.
So if I were to write the article, when is your actual election, or when would be the best time for an article to be published in terms of
Mm.
either mainly like expanding your political base in terms of the.
Yeah, I guess November 7th is election day. So you know,
What do
if
you mean November 7th? Is that the election date?
yeah, November
Okay.
7th. So before that, a week or two before. I know that it's very tight,
Yeah.
but
No.
you know,
Then I will start. I will make sure to get that article done
mm,
by at the very latest Friday of next week. But I will try
mm,
my best
mm,
to get
okay,
it out
yeah.
for the editors to read by
Right,
Wednesday.
right. I mean, that will be helpful. But to me, this interview itself or the article, whenever it's published, it'll be fine with me. It's
Yeah.
not like I have to have it by a
Yeah.
certain
Yeah.
time because
And like you clearly, this is
this is
just a
the plus.
testament to
This is the
your
plus,
already like really active political participation in terms of this campaign.
right? And this is a plus in my because I didn't even anticipate something like that until Sophia reached out to me
Yeah.
on behalf of your mom, I guess,
Mhm.
and then she reached out. So I think again, I appreciate this interview and the additional help
Yeah.
from this potentially, a positive message
Yeah.
from the article. So that'll be a plus for me. So I really don't have much of a demand to say, hey, publish it by a
Yeah.
certain time. So just do your best, and
I'll try my best to publish it
yeah.
because I want you to do well in terms of this election, and I hope that
Thank
you
you.
do
Yeah,
become elected into city council.
thank you,
So
thank
I will
you.
try my best. I have a lot of tournaments and a lot of schoolwork to get through, but
Yep,
I will make sure to allocate some time every day to at least work
cool.
on this article so it
Okay,
gets out by next week.
cool. All right.
All
Thank you
right.
very much, Rocky.
Yeah. Tell Julian good luck on his college application,
All right, I'll let him know.
and
He's
good luck on your
definitely.
run for city council.
Thank you, Rocky. You're a very good interviewer. I'm impressed.
Thank you.
Yeah, I
This is
mean,
my
you're
first
only
interview.
junior. You're a junior, so
Yeah,
yeah. I think this is the kind of experience you can not easily get out of your school.
that
So
is true. That is very
I'm happy, right? Your mom has the vision to do this. I know she has been very active in promoting debates and
true. Yeah.
presentations and on all
And
that.
good news. So I've been doing a lot of debate tournaments, and uh, in the past 2 weeks, we went to North Carolina and we went
Mm,
to Florida for
mm,
national tournaments,
mm.
and we finished 7th and 13th out of like 150 teams, so
Nice.
that's around 300 kids. We
Wow.
finished 7th place and 13th place at both of the tournaments.
This is your mom's team, right? Not school. Or
No,
this is
this is not
school.
my mom's team. My mom,
Oh, okay.
and
Okay.
this is not my school team either. This
Huh.
uh, Capital Debate. It's another organization that is
Mm,
non-affiliated towards my mom or my
mm,
school.
mm.
But as of now, we are ranked 35th in the nation for debate.
Right.
So like the debate's just something that I've been like trying to cultivate and like continue to grow.
Yeah.
And
So what are you going to learn then? What are you going to major in college? Have you thought about?
so yeah, so the way I get into college is going to be through government and humanities and public policy.
Yeah.
Because when you look at an objective standpoint, I am not going to be competing with these hard STEM kids who have like GPAs. I'm be competing with these humanity kids
Yeah.
who usually have like 96s, 97s instead of like these high grades.
Mm,
But then when I actually get into college, I'm going to do a dramatic pivot
mm,
because what I am taking in terms of a class next year is called iSTEM I, which
mm,
is where you get to make your own STEM curriculum,
mm,
and this is unique to Montgomery.
Mm,
But basically, I am going to be exploring molecular biology, genetic
mm,
manipulation, and
mm,
bioethics.
mm,
So when I get into college, I am going to be pivoting from this is just like I'm going to either go into pre-law, international relations, biology, but most importantly, an interdisciplinary, which
mm,
is the bioethics of genetic manipulation within the modern 21st century.
mm. Cool.
These are all really interesting things that I think are
Mm.
going to be very relevant in the next few years.
Exciting. Yeah. All the best to you, Rocky, as
Yeah, all
well.
the best to you too. I know you will do very well in terms of
Oh,
the SAT
thank you.
front.
Thank you. I'm sure you will too.
I have a
And
tournament tomorrow, so I actually have to
okay.
go.
Yeah, absolutely. And also pass my best regard to your mom.
Yeah.
Yeah, your
Well, do
parents.
you
Yeah,
want me to send? I do not think. I actually don't think I'm allowed to send a version of the recording to you, but
that's
I
okay.
will just say that if I am writing the article, I
Mm.
will try my best to make it as positive as I possibly can.
All right. Thank you so much, Rocky.
All right. I'm gonna stop.